Hello chess friends and welcome to your side of chess channel and welcome to the TCEC Season 19 super final between the two top engines Leela C0 and Stockfish NNUE. So after many rounds the result is, I think, clear. This TCEC super final is over because Stockfish has a comfortable +6 lead in front of Leela C0, so I don't think that Leela can catch this up because I don't think Leela can win so many games without losing some games, because the only games that Leela C0 has won, maybe one or two Leela won, but these other games really were in this dubious openings. On the other hand, Stockfish has played great games in dubious openings, also with the black pieces, managed to get some draws, but then afterwards Stockfish won the games with the white pieces in the same position. So Stockfish is simple as that, slightly better than Leela C0, but here Stockfish, I think, showed really its great attacking skills. In every game Stockfish performed really well, and that's why I think Stockfish is really the deserved winner of this TCEC Season 19. So today I wanted to show you a really great game from the round 74. I could have picked really some other games, but this was, I think, the most attractive one, with the common Stockfish attack, brutal, straightforward force sort of, and that's why I would love Stockfish games, of course, because they have really this beauty in it, because sometimes we cannot really see this possible tactics, and Stockfish shows us really some great possibilities in middle game. So let's check out now the game. As usual, we say round one and fight, of course. D4 played by Stockfish, D5, C4, C6, the Slav defense, and there's knight to F3, we have knight to F6, knight to C3, and we have now D takes C4. So this is the so-called check variation of the Slav defense. It's a very annoying setup. I really had my troubles to play against this, and here the normal idea is, of course, to play the move A4, and now comes knight to A6. So far this is the last move that has been prearranged by the TCEC. From this point on, of course, the engines are calculating the position for itself. Here E4 played by Stockfish. You could also try the move E3, but this knight hasn't played really on its natural square. One of the main ideas is to play something like bishop to F5 and followed with knight from B to D7. So that's why this knight to A6 in some occasions is a risky choice. Here E3 could lead now into a complicated line after bishop to bishop to F5, because you have some troubles after something like bishop to C4. Knight to B4 is also a threat here to play really against this weak C2 or D3 D3 square. But now the normal idea is simply to proceed knight to E5, because you cannot play, that's the cool part, you cannot play knight to C2. We would simply play queen to C2, and after bishop takes C2 we have bishop to F7, the checkmate. But okay, that was the line I think you should know after potential E3, that bishop to F5, it's not such a dangerous idea. But here Stockfish plays the immediate E4, which of course creates now, first of all, this very nice restriction idea. We get the so-called pawn central control. It's really necessary to grab some space in the center. Now after potential bishop to C4, you see all of our pieces would be on natural squares. The bishop would be on C4, these two knights on the best squares, on the knight on C3, the knight on F3, and still we have a good diagonal to open also the position for a dark square bishop. So here bishop to G4, this idea is simply to take bishop takes F3 after queen to F3 to grab our weak D4 pawn, and here Stockfish plays bishop to C4 anyway. If you take now bishop to F3, I think you can take here even with the queen, because now the game becomes really more tactical. After queen to D4 we could simply take this knight on A6, and after B to A6 you see now the pawn structure on the queen side is weakened, although black is a pawn up, but I think we should make simply progress with something like bishop to E3 or bishop to F4, rook to D1 and E5. That's the main, I think, attacking possibility here for white, and the queen will lose a couple of more tempos, because the queen took the pawn, of course, but the queen is now endangered a little bit in the center, and we can now simply play against these weaknesses here on the queen side. So that's why you see after the bishop to C4, here E6 played by Leela C0. Leela didn't go for the knight. Leela doesn't want to give up the bishop pair in such an early stage of the game, and now bishop to E3. Now this idea of bishop takes F3 doesn't work, and now knight to B4. So okay, this is a very powerful knight, and if we think about about this position more, sometimes we get really distracted by one active piece of our opponent. Most of us would try somehow maybe to play e5 and chase try really to kick away this knight away from this knight from the square b4, because we have advanced also the pawn on a4, and we cannot kick away anymore this knight from the square b4. But really, when you feel that your opponent has a great piece on the board, which is really the knight on b4, it's really great, well placed knight here, you should simply get out of the range of that particular piece. So you see now how Stockfish will do that. And the funny thing about this move knight to b4 is that in the continuation of the game, this knight to b4 will be a problem for black. You see now how funny really chess can be, because here rook to c1, because again there were this tactical ideas, bishop to f3, after maybe something like queen to f3 to play knight to c2 and creating the fork on the king and the rook. So that's why you would be again forced maybe to recapture with the g pawn, and then you could have a weakened pawn structure in front of the king. So that's why rook to c1, we have bishop to h5, and now h3. Here bishop to g6 was played. It's a clear idea, of course, to attack the weak e4 pawn. If you try instead of this maybe something like c5, then we can play bishop to b5. That's the main problem. You cannot open the position, which is the main idea of the Czech variation of the Slav defense, to build this slow developing style with preparations really to play finally the move c5. But you haven't castled, and if you cover, for instance, with the knight on d7, then it's very risky, because here g4 could happen after bishop to g6, knight to e5 wins the game immediately. If you try here something like knight to c6, again a similar idea will happen. We will simply play g4, bishop to g6, and again knight to e5, but we could have really great pressure against this knight on c6. We could then also proceed with the potential d5 move, so it's again bad position. So c5 pawn breakthrough is not possible immediately. As I said, it is normal idea of the semi-Slav, of the Czech variation, but so far it's not possible. Bishop to g6, we have now knight to d2. You see how Stockfish keeps the position compact now, and our main target is now simply to push the pawn on f4. h6, we have f4, bishop to e7, and castling. This is now really a great setup of white. I really love these three pawns in the center. They're creating really this possibility, this dynamics. Now we could also try e5. f5 is also a possibility. Queen to f3, rook to d1 is also a possibility, getting this rook maybe on this file. So great possibilities. I think black is a little bit worse here, because black is simply pushed away by this central pawn storm that white has built here in the game. Leela c0 castled, and we have now g4. This is really this Stockfish style. Never retreat, simply straightforward. We have a6 with preparations to play the move b5. Here king to h1, you cannot stop. You would love to have this maybe move a5 here to stop black's progress here on the queen side. It's not possible, because you don't have anymore your rook on the a file. So getting back with the rook is not such a good idea. You have already played with your piece once. You don't want to play with your piece twice. Here king to h1, simply improving the position of the king, and we have now b5. Bishop to e2, we have bishop to h7, and now f5. This is now this normal idea when you have such a great pawn storm, and now also we could have some opportunities to play maybe something like e5, but followed with f6, then maybe to capture here the pawn on g6. So here in the game, rook to e8, we have queen to e1, bishop to f8, getting at least some kind of a protection here. We want to have more and more protective pieces in front of our king, and we also are trying to really break the position here, break really the central pawn storm that white has built here on the light course, and crack the position finally here with the move g6. So queen to f2, very, very important idea to get our rook connection, which is of course one of the most important stages of the chess game. We should really connect our rooks, and now again with clear ideas, maybe even something like h4, g5. I'm not sure which is really the best line, but I hope you realize that white is really better here. White has more opportunities to attack in the game. Rook to c8 was played, and now rook to g1, getting of course the rook on the same file like the king. If something opens, if the position for the rook opens, then the king of course could be in danger. We have e takes f5, and now we have g takes f5. You don't want to, of course, to recapture with the pawn, then you create this isolated pawn situation, which is not good. In the game, g takes f5, and of course it opens again this very important g file. King to h8, getting out of the range of the rook, and we have now queen to f3. Now comes rook to c7. What Leela C0 is trying to do here is, of course, to build a battery, maybe on the e file or maybe on the d file, maybe even sacrifice the rook for the exchange, and maybe for a pawn here on d4, because this advanced pawns of whites are really annoying to handle. We have a great protection with these two knights, so basically black cannot do anything. Black can maybe sacrifice a piece in order to defend somehow. Here in the game, 8x b5 was played. We have 8x b5 and now rook to g2. Of course, doubling up the rooks on the g file. In the game, g6 was played. Maybe rook to d7 finally is a better idea after something like queen to g3. Maybe this could be c5 is here not a possibility, because we'll simply pass through with the move d5, and again we're having a great position. But I think one of the main ideas could also work here for black, at least to sacrifice something back. At least the position is more and more simplified after queen to d4. Okay, white is up the exchange, but at least we have stopped a little bit the white's progress here. Of course, there are now also possibilities to play the move e5, but this move has to be prepared more and more. I think this is now maybe really playable. You can be also maybe the judge of that. In the game, as I said, g6 was played, which was now a move which is, of course, defending, which is, of course, challenging the pawn on f5, but it weakens also the pawn structure in front of the king, and that's very risky when you play these games against Stockfish. Whenever you open the more and more the position again in front of your king, Stockfish will find a way how to punish that. And here, bishop to f2, we have g takes f5, and now queen to f4. So this is now really a great move, because what Stockfish of course sensed here, that black has now dark square problems. Here the only defender of the square g7 is only the bishop, and we could also use now our bishop on h4. We could also use the pawn move here on e5. Really great possibilities to attack here the position on dark squares. In the game, knight to g8 was played, and now comes d5. So if you try, for instance, something like knight to e4 here, it's very risky, because we will simply take, and if you try to take with the pawn, now comes these problems. As I said, now we see really the problems on the dark square. Here, bishop to h4 and bishop to e7 is not a possibility, because we will simply take the pawn on h6. So if you retreat with the queen, maybe here to b8, then you see bishop to f6 or queen to f6 is winning the game immediately. So that's why it's very risky here to take the pawn. It opens, as I said, further the position. White has a dominant position. If it tries here something like f takes e4, again bishop to h4 will happen. So again, we're creating this very annoying pin. And if you try bishop to g7, of course you can guess what Stockfish's next move would probably be if that line would have been played. Rook to g7 after king to g7. Now rook to f1 again wins the game immediately. You cannot protect everything. You get simply overloaded. And here also possibilities to take knight to e4. It's of course a completely winning game here for white. So that's why knight to g8, getting out of this tactical possibilities. But now Stockfish plays d5. This is really incredible move. Really trying to get this pawn storm working, really activate all of our pieces. The main idea about this move is to activate this bishop on this long diagonal. If you try here c takes d5, then here e takes f5 will happen, and here d4 is not a possibility, because we have covered this square with the queen and the bishop. And again, this bishop on d4 idea is simply, I think, too much to handle. We can also try bishop to h4. We can also attack this pawn. So you see this pawn structure is really messed up. The rook is hanging. Really too many attacking possibilities for white. Again, I don't want to show you this game. What happens if that happens? It's really obvious that white is much better here. So after the move d5, as I said, we have f takes e4, now bishop to d4, and now f6. Okay, pause the video and try, of course, to see the next Stockfish move. You can guess it probably what Stockfish does now in this particular moment. Try to find now really the attacking move. Let's play like Stockfish here, really. Take your time. Okay, here Stockfish plays, of course, the move rook takes g8. again, simply getting rid of the defender of the knight. King to g8 and bishop to f6 was played. The queen has now to retreat. If you try bishop to e7, then queen to g3 wins the game immediately. It would be a checkmate here on g7. So what you could do is maybe to escape with the queen somewhere, but again, rook to g1 is, pardon me, here a very, very important threat. Again, the king is overloaded, and it's again a game over. So here, after the move bishop takes f6, queen to b8 was played, and now d takes c6, simply taking this pawn, and now knight to d3. Okay, now this knight is on a very active square, so that's why we're not allowing this knight to stay there. Bishop to d3, we have e takes d3, and now knight to d5. Really risky position here for black. In the game, rook to f7 was played, and now rook to g1. That was our main tactical possibility. That was our main goal, to get this rook on this open file. Bishop to g7, we have queen takes d8, rook takes d8. Basically, these moves are really forced now. In the game, bishop to g7, rook to g7, but now, again, pause the video and try to find really the best move, which is winning for white. We always used to say, so test your might in chess, of course. Try to see now the best continuation. It's really a great move here by the Stockfish engine. Okay, it's again a great attack. First, we should, of course, play the check, knight to e7, because this knight on e7 is supporting our progress here with the pass pawn on the c file here, king to f8, and now rook takes g7, and now you see c7. Basically, after this move, this game is over. But okay, Leela c0 tried to prolong the game with the move rook to e8, but now king to g2, and now finally we can promote the queen. Rook takes c8, knight to c8, bishop to f5, knight to d6, and after move bishop to h3, which was sort of a funny idea by Leela c0. In this position, Leela c0 resigned, so it was again fatality mode here for Leela c0. Stockfish played here really an outstanding attack. I think what you could do instead of this bishop to h3, but Leela can make sometimes fun in chess. After move, you could maybe try bishop to d7, but now knight to f3 is normal, and here maybe knight to e4, simply regrouping with our knights, and still we can create maybe a pass pawn situation. So it's, I think, playable here. Bishop to c6 doesn't work because you get a knight to d4 and similar ideas. So okay, great attack by the Stockfish engine. Great performance, really. As I said, +6, incredible result, because in the previous TCEC seasons, Leela c0 was winning, but slightly winning. We'll see, maybe this will be a +10 for Stockfish. Even still, I think more than 15 rounds to play. I'm not sure, but as I said, this was an incredible game in the round 74, and I think for those who have troubles maybe to play against the Czech variation of the Slav defense, this was also a very instructive game. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. It was really a brutal attack by Stockfish. If you want to see more brutal attacks like this, check out my commented chess games played by computer series. Here's the link. And if you want to follow my Altibox Norway chess tournament, which is now played these days, check out also this link. Great games have been played in human chess now in this very nice tournament. And if you like this content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.